Here were the parts of the organization, which I called Systems 1, and you remember about their cybernetic interaction with the outside world. Those systems will go into oscillation, we said, unless there is a System 2, which is this, intended precisely to damp that oscillation. Then we have our first corporate management level, the total organization management, dealing with the inside of the system, right here and now. And in contrast to that, System 4, dealing with the future and the outside. And then the task of top management, right up there, System 5, perceived as mainly being about monitoring the homeostat that connects 3 and 4. That's how it was. Remember, 1971, President Allende was in office. He remarked in this letter that he had studied all my works, he had collected a team of scientists together, and would I please come and take it over? I could hardly believe it, as you can imagine. But this was to start me on a journey which made me travel 8,000 miles over and over and over again. I was commuting between London and Santiago for 2 years. While that model of the viable system's in your mind, let me tell you what happened when I first explained it to President Allende himself. Allende was a doctor, a medical doctor, as you may know. And therefore, it was very easy to explain the model to him in terms of neurocybernetics as the way of controlling the body. And then I went into the business of controlling the state. And so I said to him, let us suppose that these elements of the state are the big departments of state, like the foreign affairs and the economy and home affairs, so on. And then we'll have those, and the following things will happen, and then we must have a System 2, and I built it up on a piece of paper lying on the table between us. Then a System 3 and a System 4, and I got that far. And then I got to System 5, and I drew a big histrionic breath. And I said, I was going to say, this compañero presidente is you. Before I could say it, he suddenly smiled very broadly, and he said, ah, System 5, at last, the people. That was a pretty powerful thing to happen. It had a very big influence on me. I can't go into that aspect, the political aspect, in this program. It's not what it's about. But I'm sure you'll bear in mind that I don't have to go and work in places where I don't want to be. Let us look at a little diagram to show how I set about things. Politics, yes indeed. Politics is the essence of this, although I've said I'm not going to discuss the politics, obviously essential. Cybernetics essential, that's what I'd gone to do. And somehow we had to make a political and cybernetic analysis and bring it together. Now you'll see that I have written there recursive model, and not just model of the viable system, although that's what it was. And I want to explain what this idea of recursion is all about. If there is such a thing as a valid cybernetic model of a viable system, then you will expect it to operate wherever you have a viable system. One of the things you notice as you look around is that every viable system has parts, that's the Systems 1, which are themselves viable, and that same viable system with those viable parts is itself part of another viable system. This is what the idea of recursion says. Now, recursion is a mathematical word, and technically I use it in a mathematical sense. But the explanation I have just given is quite enough for our purposes, that inside every viable system we shall find another. So both society and the economy. Now, that's a bit lopsided, but that's how it was, because after all, the government is about controlling society. But Chile at that time was very much about the control of the economy, and that's why the economy got such emphasis. And what I'm going to be talking about today is primarily about the economy. At the moment, I'm giving you the picture. Let's look at the next slide. This is indeed the economy. And here you see what I was saying about recursion. We've got the state, foreign affairs, let's say, home affairs. This one is a system one of the whole nation dealing with the economy. Let us make a recursion. Now we have the economy. And so on down. These are the ramas, the big major branches of industry: heavy industry, light industry, materials industry, and consumer industry. 4 ramas. And we can take a rama, do a recursion, make another viable systems model of one of those ramas. Now we find that our systems 1 are sectors. These sectors are what we should usually call industries, like fishing, like textiles, like iron and steel. So when we make a viable system model of a sector, a whole industry, we find that the elements are enterprises or firms. If we make a model of any one firm by recursion, we then find that the elements of the viable system are plants. And this is how we worked through the economy, modeling everything by recursion, always against the same model which we studied last time. On this side, I'm showing the workers and their interaction with the formal part that I was just explaining. We have the body of the workers, we have the trade unions, which is CUT in Chile, exactly the opposite you notice of TUC. I think it must be because it's in the southern hemisphere. And inside CUT, we have the branch and the chapel. I've used the English words for these, not the Spanish words, because they're a somewhat different organization. But I think you'll see, you'll understand how that's organized. And then down here again, at the plant level, there comes this closing of the loop, this interaction of the people with their work. This is where the action is. So this edifice we built. We had to make a lot of models, and I'll talk more about that towards the end. How do you control an economy? So this is what we set out to do. What we have on the screen now is a typical communications center in Chile. We had a very, very big problem to solve here, because although there is such a thing as advanced technology, and many of you will know about teleprocessing and all that goes with that stuff, Chile had no money. Chile was being blockaded economically. What we had was telex machines. So there's nothing super sophisticated about this, but you can communicate more or less instantaneously by telex, so why not? So that is the kind of network we set up. All the dots are telex machines, centralizing information through one node and then a set of nodes centralizing to another in every kind of habited place. I wonder if you realize just how big a problem this is. What do you know about Chile? I wonder if we could look at the map we have over here. It's a long, thin country, nearly 3,000 miles high as we look at it on the map, and barely 100 miles across. Up in the north there you see Arica, and below that is a desert with a rainfall of about 0.5 millimeter a year. Very dry, that's where the nitrate mines are. In the south, where you see Puerto Montt, on the other hand, there's an unbelievable rainfall of 2.5 meters a year. It hardly ever stops pouring down. And so it is that in Santiago and the towns on the coast near Santiago is the most beautiful mix of these two extreme climates you could possibly imagine. It must be rather like the Garden of Eden. It's always, almost always, like an English summer day. There's enough rain, but not too much. sunny, gets a bit hot in January, but that's the picture. As to people, they are very strangely distributed. There are 10 million people in Chile, and about 4 million of them live in Santiago and outlying districts, about another million on the coast. If we add 2 million up in Arica and 2 million down in Punta Arenas, we've pretty well accounted for the place. Nonetheless, there are towns spread all along that, and the communications problem is enormous. Well, fortunately, that had all been solved before I got there for other reasons. There is a microwave link between Santiago and Arica, and between Santiago and Puerto Montt, and there is high-frequency radio link from Puerto Montt to Punta Arenas. And this was the thing that we mobilized, and now we can look at a schematic of it. Here we have it, the whole 3,000 miles, all coming to a telephone switchboard on a daily basis, all this information, going here to the cybernetic network center, which can handle these data using, of course, a computer. Now, I have been very much blamed for doing this, and I resent the blame I've had very much. I've been told that I centralized power for Dr. Allende. This isn't the case at all, as I'm going to try and show you in a minute. These data were not used in an autocratic fashion at all. They all went to one computer because we only had one computer. And if you've only got one computer, then ipso facto, you're centralized. But we were not centralized in the political sense in which this has been taken up by some critics.